Chief, we got to see the active shooter training that you hope never has to be used, but talk about that, why it's so vitally important.
So it's really important because that's one of the main tools in our toolbox. And you got to see an opportunity here today of how the officers train and what they do. And, you know, it's really a tall order that we're asking from these folks. I mean, think about it for a minute. We have an officer, at least one officer in every single district school. Mm-hmm. And if that catastrophic event occurs, they're going to go down the hall by themselves. And they're going to do what you saw them train on today. That's a big order.
And he or she may only have minutes, because some of your training officers told me, listen, these scenarios often begin and end, the active shooter portion, within minutes.
They do. And so that's the big difference here is we're changing the dynamics a little bit because we're going to have an officer pre-positioned in all those schools. So what typically takes minutes to arrive will now be seconds for the officers to get on the scene. And look, they are really committed to doing their jobs, and you saw it.
Chief, talk a little bit about the depth of training. We saw a sliver of it, and obviously for tactical and strategic reasons, you don't and shouldn't give all that away to the bad guy. But talk a little more broadly about your training and what goes into it year-round.
So for the summertime, we're pretty fortunate in that we get, in our summertime, the school district police officers get more training than most police officers get. Mm-hmm. We're somewhere in the neighborhood about 150, 160 hours of training, and it encompasses a broad range of things, from leadership training to search and seizure to high liability to active shooter. It's really, really broad. And so because we've hired 100 new officers now in the last year.
Now you have how many so far?
We have 100 that we've hired. And so
to add to a force that already had
150.
Okay.
So that really taxes our training division a little bit. We've had to change the way we do training for as a whole for the summertime.
But the 100 you've hired is part of the mandate to make sure every school has a police officer.
Correct.
Every public school in this county.
Every school district, every district school in this county will have a police officer on it, a school police officer.
And the training is year-round. You're incorporating new people into the training. One advantage you have, though, is I speak to all of them. Virtually every one of these people has a lot of background before they come to your department.
They do. And so one of the reasons why we've been able to attract the 100 officers, because we changed our marketing strategy a little bit. And we're going after the officers that have good track records, that have been in this job for a long time. The amount of experience and the things that people bring with them that we're hiring now is really quite remarkable. I'm really so impressed with them.
Chief, talk about beyond the training for active shooter. You and I had a chance to speak a few weeks ago. You're really looking a lot farther than that in terms of school security, and a lot of it begins with getting to know your school police officer, intervention, dialogue. Talk about what you're looking at, big picture.
So that's really a great question. The tendency now is to want to focus on one single issue, whether it be active shooter, safe spots within the classroom. Realistically, when it comes down to school safety, what we're doing here is, first of all, we work very hard on the left side of what we call the X.
The left side of the X, what's that?
So the X is the day a catastrophic event occurs. We want to work on the left side of that. Prevention, intervention, diversion, doing all those things, threat assessments, training, partnering, collaboration, all those things up front that help us identify a person that potentially poses a threat as they're working their way up the ladder towards committing a crime.
Give me an example of the new muscularity, the new focus you're putting on that piece, that huge piece of all of this.
So there's a couple of really good pieces I can give you. For the first time in many, many years in law enforcement, we're having our police officers, the sheriff's office, local police officers, the fire department, trauma centers, everybody around the table. And we're working together to develop response plans so that we're responding efficiently and effectively. What used to be a safety plan for a school was, single, small, each school had a safety plan. Well, now we share those plans. So not only is it what's happening on the school campus, how is the fire department going to respond? How are the local police going to respond? How do we manage the scene very, very quickly when we get there? So that's a big tool in the toolbox. The other big one for us is our ability now to partner our detectives, we call it behavioral services unit, detectives with mental health workers. And so we're looking, when we get these online threats, Those things, we're looking at it from a holistic perspective. You know, typically what will happen is the police will investigate the elements of the crime. The mental health workers will investigate and work with the people so that we're looking at prevention, what safety plans have to be put in place, are there charges that need to be placed, what do we do long term when this person comes back, how do we manage that?
What kind of mental health counseling is available to them?
Exactly.
What kind of follow-up is there?
Correct.
All of that.
Correct. It goes back to the old, you know, in law enforcement work, there's a saying that you're never going to arrest your way out of a problem. Well, the same thing is true here. You know, in order to be successful and do everything we can to keep our kids safe, we have to collaborate, we have to get out in front, and we have to make sure that everybody in the school district owns safety.
Chief, you have talked a lot about all aspects of security. You talk to parents all the time in this community, to schools, to parents, to teachers, to students. What are the biggest questions you get? And using us as a vehicle for a moment, what are the things you want to say to people today, right now?
Well, one of the big questions I always get is, are my children safe? You know,
It's the most fundamental question we
most
can ask.
fundamental question. And what I'll tell you is yes, we are doing everything possible to keep your children safe. And we're talking about prevention, intervention, diversion, safety, security. What else we got? Reunification, emergency response.
But you need the parents and students' help. Get to know your school police
Correct.
officer. Call. It's the old see something, say something. If you have concerns about a bully, if you have concerns on campus, talk about it so it doesn't morph into something else.
Exactly, and that's why we're there. And the relationships we build with these students, with your children, are really quite remarkable. And you cannot believe the information we get. But on the back end of that, the commitment of that police officer. So police officers at a school, your children's school, and however many hundreds are there, it's like the police officers like their family.
What is your takeaway or your request for the students in this community, for the parents in this community, for all of us? Because all of us have a piece in making sure our schools are safe. It's not just on you all.
Yep. So there's two parts of safety: being safe and feeling safe. And it takes all of us working together. So on the being safe side, you are safe. You're seeing in this training today, I talked about 8 or 9 different dimensions that we focus on every day to make sure your children are safe. But it takes all of us working together. Hold your children accountable. Talk about a safety plan. Make sure they understand what to do. We don't want people bullied. If your children are having problems, come see us. That's what we're there for. We're one of the few people in life that you'll ever hear say, we want you to bother us.
You never want to be on a day where you and I are having to talk about these active shooter drills that suddenly had to become real. You'd much rather talk all the time and spend all of your effort on, as you said, the left side of that, the prevention and intervention.
Yep, the prevention, intervention, diversion, left side of that X. You know, the reality of it is that we're prepared to do our jobs. I don't want anybody to think that we're not, but we are prepared to do our jobs. But if we have to come to that day we have to discharge our firearm, in my book, we failed.
When it gets to that point, all the other pieces.
We didn't do good enough.
Yeah. Big responsibility, but every one of the officers I meet, they take personal pride in their schools.
They do, and I tell you, they would do anything for those children. That's what's really remarkable too. The sense of ownership, family, they would do anything for them.